And roll. Thank you, Matt Beard, and everyone else for joining. So, hey, folks, what's up? I just want to say before we make any intros, this session was inspired by a number of people, one of them being Mark Smith. So, whatever I say here, you can blame him for. There we go. That's on the recording. Yes. So, we didn't say Dynamics 365 customer engagement is dead. We said is Dynamics 365 customer engagement dead, right? So, yeah, I do want to just say that this is a very I don't know. Hey, Claire, should we call it like a Tarantino style session? We're going to be pretty
Yeah,
brutal, aren't we?
we're always brutal.
Okay. I don't feel so bad then. So let's make some intros. Claire, do you want to go first?
Yeah, so I'm Claire Edgson. I'm the European lead architect for Avanade, one of Microsoft's fast track recognized architect for 2 years running. You, Chris?
Right. So as you can see, Claire is a lot more talented and smarter than I am. So Claire's a lead architect, so she has to worry about all the products. I have one product to worry about. So my name is Chris Huntingford. I'm the global Power Apps lead here at Avanade, and otherwise I've been awarded the bespoke Badger recognized loud shirt wearer, which I'm not wearing today, but I do have the award. I bestowed it upon myself purely because of the fact that Claire has awesome things and I don't. So I had to compete some way, right? Cool. So that's us. Yeah, we didn't really put Twitter handles and things. We figured that if you guys wanted to find us, you would, or we'll find you. We can do the stalking either way. Like we're not really fussed about that. Anyway, so what we want to do really quickly is before we go into this whole discussion, right? There are a number of points of view that you're welcome to disagree with us or agree with us on. Stick some comments in the chat, please. We'll do our best to respond. So I do have the chat window open. So if you do say something or leave a rude GIF or something like that, we will give you a shout out. And yeah, be prepared. So first things first, right? What we're going to do is we just want to take a little survey of the current D365 architecture. Now, a lot of you will know that in Dynamics 365 that there is a lot under the hood. I mean, back in NAM, like Claire, when did you start learning about Dynamics?
The original Dynamics. So
Yeah.
we've got to be going back 14 years, the original one on-prem.
God. Yeah, I was CRM 3, so I don't feel so bad. You were like version 1 or
Yeah,
before. Yeah. So it's
and,
changed.
and AX1.
Good Lord. So it's changed significantly, hasn't it, right? It used to be so with CE, what was previously known as CE, or could still be known as CE, we'll tell you shortly. There were three little things: sales, service, and marketing. And now when we look at the landscape, it's significantly different. Um, so I just want to tell you something. This slide I stole from somebody else's slide deck unashamedly while I was at Microsoft. And yeah, there are some things that we're going to tackle here. So one of the perceptions is that when we talk about D365, people that aren't necessarily in the know, they think we're talking about either finance and operations or AX or CRM or CE or whatever we're calling it this week. But actually, there's a lot to consider here. So, Claire, correct me if I'm wrong, right? The ERP suite in Dynamics is fairly different to the customer engagement or CRM suite, right?
Yeah, so it's a totally different structure underneath. So what we find is people buy finance and ops, and they assume they can just plug and play with customer service or with field services, and it's not, because they're just totally different systems. We've got some fantastic integration points like Dual Write that's really come along, on virtual agents and virtual entities to be able to pull between the data, but they are two totally different underlying technologies, so they are not the same thing. While I'm at it, I'm going to call out HR, which is hiding there in the modular solutions. It makes it look like it's part of the customer engagement pack. It's not. It's part of the old finance and ops systems. It's got some Dataverse tables, but it's largely its own little black box. So lots of these pieces have been bought or dragged from elsewhere and given a Dynamics label. That does not mean that they work and play together out of the box.
Spot on. And I know. So when you and I were looking at the slide originally, first of all, other than the lack thereof, the correct labeling and icons, there was one thing that you called out that you were like, why on earth would that be done? And I just want you guys to know, first of all, when we talk about Dynamics, there is something that's very key to Dynamics. And Claire, do you want to take that nitpicking thing that you saw?
What my Azure thing?
Yeah.
Yeah. So for everything we do, whether we're talking Power Platform or any form of Dynamics, Azure is the tenancy that we sit on. That's your Active Directory. It might be your blob, your file store. It's what Office 365, Microsoft 365 talks to. The one thing I saw here was this tiny little Azure blob. Everything we do on the tenancies is Azure. So the fact that it's just a little tiny dot is ridiculous because it's so much more of the part of everything here than something like Microsoft Graph.
Exactly. So I agree with you. And I think like that's very key to know. So folks, just so that you know, when we talk about like what was known or is known or could still be known as CE, we are only talking about layer number 2. Okay. And I'll tell you why shortly. But we're going to be focusing on this layer here. Okay. And we're trying to figure out if it's dead or not. Pretty generally, we'll figure it out at the end of this call, hopefully. But I know a lot of you on the call are customer engagement or CRM specialists. I know Deborah, wow, she just mentioned that. So, you know, Matt Beard just said that somebody's using CRM 3.0. Deborah said she's using CRM 3.0. That's crazy. Yeah, that is definitely dead. We will put that to bed, and we will help.
That needs putting in a box and forgetting.
Yeah, definitely. Although it was the beginning of some pretty interesting stuff. But anyway, let's get on to the real thing. Is CE dead? Claire, do you think it's dead?
Depends on your definition of dead. As a title?
Yeah.
So, as a title or a product?
Well, we're going to figure that out now. So go to the Microsoft website and you take a look. And there's lots of these sales EBITs and service marketing. I don't really see it there. Right? I know we talk about it quite a bit. Like I used to be a customer engagement pre-sales person. And then when you go and actually look in the portal and try and buy it, you can take out a trial, but it doesn't look like it exists as a SKU. But then I found this really interesting thing on the doc site. And, you know, when you go and take a look at it, it says, with this change for online customers, we are no longer using the term Dynamics 365 for customer engagement apps to refer to the collection of the following apps and its services, blah, blah, blah. Okay. For online customers, these Dynamics 365 apps collectively referred to as customer engagement apps run on Dataverse and use Power Apps model-driven app design. Okay. So I'm still a little bit undecided, right? Do we still call them D365 customer engagements? Do we not? I don't know. I mean, the verbiage is pretty ambiguous if you ask me. So there's something that I figured out, right? What we call them in the community is we call them the first party apps. Okay.
They're just pre-built apps. So imagine you've gone on to any app source or Google Play or whatever you buy your apps from. You buy a pre-built app. Now that's what your first party apps are. So what we call Dynamic CE is really a first party pre-built app for Power Platform. We buy it, we add things to it, and it does everything we want out of the tin with the bits we add on it. So it's just like adding Lego bricks on around it to make it work, but still within the Power Platform.
Cool. Well, we've got Dave Harris guest as Mr. Spoiler Alert #1. Thanks, Dave. So, yeah, that's a good point. So first of all, I agree. Dynamics 365 sales, service, marketing, and field service, the core applications. I'm not talking about the insights bits, right? The core ones. So are you saying that those are just Power Apps?
Yeah, that's all they are. To the rest of us, if from technically, they are just very well-formed Power Apps.
Okay. So I think that's a good point because that's probably some of the stuff we need to get into, right? Is really starting to think about the whole concept of why they're just Power Apps. Okay. So when I take a look at this diagram that Microsoft so cleanly put out for us, Common Data Service Open Flexiverse or whatever it is this week, right? Now named to Dataverse, right? That acts as the core for the model-driven apps. So essentially, without that core, can a model-driven app or Dynamics 365 exist?
No.
There we go. So the customer engagement pieces that we were referring to, as Dave said, only the name is dead, the concept remains. They're effectively, basically just pre-built Power Apps, which is kind of cool because do you know that when I was talking to somebody from Mendix the other day, they lost a deal because a partner sold Power Platform in with pre-built Power Apps in the form of Dynamics. That's pretty terrifying, right? So that's a competitive choice that they made, and that's a competitive choice they decided to go in with to beat a competitive product. So I think what we need to do is go back and just hold the phone and try and figure out exactly it is what we're talking about as far as Dynamics goes in the Power Platform. Because it's quite easy to get lost in the technology. But if you go all up and you take an all up look at actually what's going on here, we'll give you a history lesson. So first of all, Microsoft themselves, I should know, I did work there for a little bit. They break down they used to have this thing called, Claire, have you ever heard of the 3 clouds?
Yeah.
Yeah. What do you think of that?
Well, I think it's because that's where the technologies have been driven from. That's where the budgets have come from. We needed Office 365. That made Azure grow bigger. Azure growing bigger made the business apps come to the cloud. The business apps needed their own specialist team, and that's why we got the 3 clouds.
Yeah. And then I remember in one of James Phillips's recent calls that he did, or one of the recent sessions, he basically calls it the Microsoft cloud. So it's not 3 clouds anymore, because that's how it was commercially based. It's 1 cloud. And I think that your point makes sense. But if we're going to compete against Google and Amazon and Salesforce and Mendix and OutSystems and all of that, they don't ever talk about having to integrate their clouds. And the minute you mention the word integration to a customer, it sounds like a lot of work, right? So when we talk about these areas, we talk about 1 cloud with a number of service areas. Now, what's really cool is I know that multiple businesses that I've worked for have been split out into these clouds, well, service areas at least. I previously worked in the business application service area. Claire, you've kind of gone everywhere, right?
Yeah, I've worked in all 3.
Yeah, so that's why you are a lead enterprise architect, whereas I myself am a humble Power Platform person. But what I do know is there's only one, I want to call it a product, but it's a set of products. There's only one set of products that crosses all 3 of these clouds.
Yeah, right. The Power Platform talks to all of these, and that it is really the glue that joins them together. And Microsoft have designed that 1 cloud that way to allow a lot of the pre-built automations that sat in each of the 3 clouds have been completely replaced with Microsoft Power Automate, and they're expecting more and more of the apps to either be done through Power Apps or Forms Pro.
Spot on. So what I learned when I was hanging around at Microsoft is that when you look at where a lot of these things have come from, right? So I'm going to use Power Apps because that's my thing. I love a good Power App. Power Apps effectively came from the SharePoint world in the form of like Canvas apps. So they had Project Sienna many moons ago. When Project Sienna was released, it was supposed to be a mechanism to extend Windows, wasn't it?
That's where it started off.
Yeah, and then it grew up into what we call Canvas apps. And then model-driven apps obviously comes from Dynamics, the customer engagement modules, so sales, service, field service, and the marketing. But the other bits, like, do you have any idea where all of those originated from?
So the reason they put the data connectors in there was to make a nice, easy way for non-super techs to be able to connect without having to create lots of heavy API work. It was to allow all these things to connect by lesser users that didn't need all the permissions to go off and create API controls. And it meant more and more people that were doing Power BI or simple Power Apps to be able to connect to day-to-day stuff without having to ask anybody.
Absolutely. Do you remember what I said to you the other day? I think I called Power BI Yellow Excel.
It's a little bit more than Yellow Excel.
Yeah.
It's got a long history. It's the oldest one of the family, but what it does do is it talks to any of the data sources that we've got there. So it is the one that is truly unreliant on Dataverse. So the reason we've got that extra layer there with the data connectors, AI Builder comes from the Azure AI family, and obviously Dataverse is a condensed form of SQL. So they're there to make it really easy for people to build and shape things without needing to be DBAs, without needing to be on the Azure portal. It's to make more and more accessibility for everyone to play with all those pieces without needing special permissions.
That actually makes sense. So basically, if we think about Dynamics CE, just put it on the shelf for a little bit. all of this stuff came from the need to create or give people the ability to build out solutions faster, without having to be like uber technical. So, I mean, I can tell you, like, I used to do work in SQL, and I still love SQL. I know you still. So wait, I want to ask you a question, Claire. What is the world's greatest data storage facility?
Oracle.
Ah, Dataverse all the way.
No,
Anyway,
I come from Oracle and IBM originally. SQL is pretty good, and I have to say I like SQL Azure. And then we can get into a whole different debate as to what Dataverse actually is.
so yeah, Claire and I have discussions about this all the time. But yeah, so for me, I just think that it's important to know that the digital bricks that make up Dynamics customer engagements, right? The name, not the product, the name, are effectively Power Platform pieces, right? And I kind of feel like everything that lives inside Dynamics 365 customer engagement is effectively, you know, Power Platform, which is kind of cool. So the question I've got is, if that's the case, right? If the case is that Dynamics 365 customer engagement, again, the name, not the solution, so sales, we'll call it the first party apps. If the first party apps are just Power Apps, what is stopping me from just going bananas and building everything else? And I think the only way to test this is with a horrendous use case. What do you think?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay. Because I'm use case bonkers, right? So I do love a use case. So let me tell you my use case. You can be as critical as you would like, right? So many moons ago, many moons ago, actually it was a couple of years ago. I'm making myself sound like an elf. Many moons ago, I was in a engagement with an organization. So we'll call them a public sector organization. And they were having a number of issues with their processes. So I'm just gonna, I'm obfuscating some of the story. You know what they say, never ruin a good story with fact. So effectively, when I chatted to them, I said to them, hey, you know, the typical Dynamics thing, what processes can I solve for you? And they were like, hey, we've got problems with this and this and this. And you know, I think people on this call will be familiar with this type of stuff. I mean, unless you live in a boat, and if you do, you should tell me. Most of you live in a house. In local gov, you have the ability to, and you know, wherever you are in the world, you have the ability to chat to your council or your municipality or whatever we're calling them. And basically, what they do is they take your information on board, they capture it, they process it, then they do something with it. And what was happening in this local gov org is that they had loads of disparate SaaS products everywhere. Well, not even SaaS, a load of them on-prem. And they were also using these filthy spreadsheet things and these filthy list things. And ultimately what happened was that we decided, well, a good way to kind of democratize the data would be to put in something like Dataverse. Okay, so we got a bunch of the data, it was pretty basic, created a bunch of custom entities inside Dataverse. Then we whacked the data in there without any data transformation. Okay, there was a lot of data transformation. And all we did was we built a bunch of Canvas apps on top of them. Now, hold the phone, right? Because you know my theory on Canvas apps, they shouldn't be line of business solutions. So don't worry, I'll get to that. We also added in a bunch of Power Automate flows to automate, you know, notifications and data movements and everything. And we also had Power BI, the most popular part of the platform. And that was burgered or sandwiched in between M365 and then obviously Azure we'll get to later. So pretty straightforward, right? Not a difficult use case thus far.
So the first question is,
Yeah.
there are so many processes in there that you will have had to build out around the Canvas apps to make it work and integrate with the other things.
Yeah.
You are missing so many parts that you're going to have to build manually.
Yep.
Why would you choose to do that other than using a Dynamics product?
Okay, so let me show you.
A pre-built piece. Now, there's
Yeah.
a good reason, and you know well that I actually chose to go the other way for a customer recently who needed a vaccine management solution really quickly, and it was too expensive to do it via the Dynamics product, so we built it completely in Dataverse, and it works really well.
It's
But it was very short time, very short budget, perfect solution. But where you need to manage lots of people doing lots of things, the pre-built apps that are Dynamics are definitely worth a look first.
Okay, so I have a thing, right? Yeah, and Martin's made a good point. He's like potholes,
Yeah, absolutely.
inspections. Martin, it's like you're in my brain, man.
Yeah, it's exactly where I was going next. Yeah, I'm a field services passion person, me.
Yeah. So Martin, you know Claire, right? I mean, yeah. So check it out. What I did was I was like, okay, the reason I used Dataverse is because I wanted these bad boys here. Okay, I wanted that process-driven UX. There was no feasible way, and I tried. There was no feasible way I was going to be able to build what I needed inside a Canvas app. And you know what I mean? You know my issue with Canvas apps and people overloading stuff. I mean, you're limited to the number of controls. You don't do stuff in concurrent and things like that. Things will break, right? And you overdo. I mean, we had a conversation the other day about overdoing the math in a Canvas app, and you can't even delegate that back to the data source because that's like on file of the event. So what we did was we took model-driven apps and we loaded all these entities into the model-driven apps. So this was all done on by the way, on what the equivalent is of now a Power Apps per app license. Okay, so the reason we did it like this is because Dynamics cost like $60 and this cost them $6. So that was really great, right? Because then they got some good bang for their buck. The processes weren't too heavy. The appy flappy bits, you know, they could run around with their mobile devices and go and be like, hey, look, Jeff, there's a pothole, and capture that, and then it automagically transmogrified itself back into the Dataverse, and then the model-driven folk could run it through a process. Now, Martin's hit on a good point, and I'm not going to go to it yet because there's something else that we did. We also enabled portals. Now, we can fight about this all day, right? I know the limitations. I know the licensing issues. Folks in the chat, we are well aware of the fact that portals are expensive, they're difficult to configure, and there is a resource shortage. Do you agree?
Utterly.
Yeah. So a lot of folks will go down the routes of like Sitecore or Umbraco or the Portal Connector or something else like that. But in this scenario, as I said, don't ruin a good story with fact. We used portals. And that was cool because we could expose it to external users, but still no dynamics was harmed in the equation of this. And then finally, you know, it got a bit more interesting doing some Azure bolt-ons where we were actually doing proper integration, not that waffly-poffly Excel integration. And we were doing data transmogrification where we were taking data from point A, chuck it into Dataverse, and then surfacing it through the model-driven apps. Again, no extra cost, right? So I've done all of this for a really cheap rate. And it worked. It worked fine. I didn't have any issues. But you know what happened after that?
They want something else and something else and something else, and then they want more processes on top of it.
Pretty much. So I landed myself in what we would call a pickle, because if you think about the number of people and the API calls limited to the per app license and the number of things that were happening, building a God mode app was not a good plan, right? So one of the things I figured out pretty quickly is that if you try and build something like a giant power app with, and by the way, you know, if you embed a Canvas app and a model app, it still counts as one app, right? So in per app, you can just embed everything. Like, why wouldn't I, right? Because, hey, I can get away for it. It's free. Nothing's free, by the way. If it's free, you're the product. So basically, building a God mode app didn't work in this scenario. And also, back on Martin's points, when he mentioned they're just incident types, we knew we had to scale up. And on your point that you made, we then started looking at dynamics, right? Now, the question I want to ask, right? So you know the customer service SKU pretty well. So do I. I know Trisha's on our side is also magnificent, and so is EY Coleman at customer service. But the reason we went this route is because we could export the solution from our little Power Platform environment. I don't want to say little, upload it into the Dynamics environment, simply snap the entity into the case entity, because there were going to be too many fields on the form anyway for just a single case, and the reporting was going to be easier. But like, what else do you think could I have added from a customer service perspective? Why do you think they would get value from buying Dynamics here?
Well, you've also got all the inbuilt integrations. So Dynamics will come with all the integration into Office 365, things like Outlook. You've got the SharePoint integration out of the box. We've got some of that in Dataverse, but it's got more angles to it into Dynamics. You've also got all the natural linking between the tables. It would take you a year or more to write all the lookups and all the hierarchical pieces you've got in Dynamics. It's great as a proof of concept what you did, but as soon as you need to have more and more to it, you need something that's got all the bits pre-worked out for you. You'll spend years trying to match this.
Oh, proper. So you're saying that I shouldn't have gone this route?
So I've got lots of customers who will do the proof of concept purely in Dataverse, but you have to have a definite point where you go, you know what, this is going to take so long to build, and the amount of money I will have spent, plus the fighting I'm going to do to try and integrate and make things work. The way Dynamics will do out the box is a really fine line where it instantly falls over into being using part of the Dynamics family in here. That gives you better value because you get so much more straight from the box. If you try to match every part in there, and field services I love, and that's so complicated, you'd spend far too long building it again. Why would you, when the cost will balance itself out against the time you spend to build it?
Oh, spot on. Yeah, I totally agree. We are going to get into something sneaky after this. I'm gonna call it out now, restricted entities, but just wait, right? So I kind of agree with that, right? So I think, when the solution started getting really badass and they said, hey, Chris, we need to get like proper omni-channel engagement here. We need to be able to do proper routing. We need SLAs. We need entitlements, which all you could probably try and build in core platform. But like, imagine the number of flows that you're going to create just to do automated call routing or record routing. Like, it's bonkers, right? Also, Dave's actually made a great point. He says, plus businesses do other stuff that is outside the scope of the project sometimes, but inside Dynamics 365. So I'll probably need them in the future. Bang on, my friend. You've hit the nail on the head. The one thing we knew, and I knew about this, was that I'm not the smartest, crayon and brightest crayon in the box, but I can tell you that I did know that at some point we were going to upsell. Okay. And that's normally the case. When you're building something in Power Platform as a core platform engineer, you need to understand the fact that at some point this may move into a Dynamics project, right? And I mean, they said, Claire, they were like, hey, how do we get that process where we can just create a case and then automatically transfer that to a field services engineer?
Yeah, so perfect case management. As soon as you start to go into case management, you've really got to think whether Dynamics is matching the cost. There are cases where it doesn't.
Yeah.
It's having enough parts that are there. Now, obviously, field services doesn't come with the main piece out of the box. You buy field services a separate module. But as soon as you need anything to do with maintenance and repair, or a little man in a van doing something, field services, there is nothing else out there that matches what that does. So case management, the minute somebody tells me they're building case management power apps, have you looked at the cost difference between what you're going to build and Dynamics?
Exactly. And that kind of brings us on to the next point, right? So do you build it or do you buy something that's 75% of the way there? So, when we were chatting the other day, we both agreed that I've never personally, I don't know about you, I've never seen Dynamics in any way, shape, or form go into a customer as like vanilla, ever.
No, I mean, we all need different things. And hardest thing is customers want things to be the same as they were before. So part of the discussion is always to help them fit to the product as much as is possible so they're not making extra levels. But no solution, I don't care whether it's SAP, Dynamics, or whatever, none of them perfectly fit a customer.
No.
And that's where Power Platform is brilliant, because we can extend it using the same tools it's built with without lots of heavy custom dev. So if we look at F&O, you need custom devs to be able to change it significantly. In what was the old CE modules, we just extend it with Power Platform in the way that we build everything else.
Yeah. We're just going to mute someone.
I think it's Luke.
Cool. Yeah, no, I totally agree. So basically, Power Platform is Microsoft's answer to, number one, being able to start from scratch and building out a kick-ass solution that can help a customer. But number two, being able to extend the rest of the Microsoft products, including customer engagement, right? I did hear something very interesting some time back, and I made a bold statement on a call one day saying that X++ is dead. So maybe we can rope some of the finance and operations folks into a call at one point and cause some trouble there. But
no, they're fine. I mean, the one thing you've got to understand, Power Platform really stands on its own for building things quick and fast and answering a problem now. You can build amazing things really quickly, but you will get to the point where you've got to make a cost decision whether you're actually better off picking up a pre-built app. The cost of the licenses is significantly more, but you get so much more for that extra money.
yeah, And that's so a lot of the time when I've walked into organizations, they just don't understand the full breadth of what can be done in Dynamics. And in fact, even now, when you if I went back to that slide and showed we pulled that horrendous one and we looked at all the landscape, it's bonkers. Like there's no feasible way you can know everything in there. And if you do, I mean, I know there's some folk on this call that are badass, and you're pretty badass, and I'm okay-ish, but you can't. There's just no way you can know everything. So at what we've discovered thus far is D365 CE as a name doesn't really exist, but as a concept is by no means dead at all. In fact, it's very much alive and kicking. So far, that's where we've gotten to. Do you agree?
Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome. Okay, so let's move on to my little friend over here, because this one is, I'm very passionate about these. I also, oh, there's a great question in the chat. Curious, would you apply that same logic to ISV products as well as first-party apps? You know what? So it depends what type of ISV products. I mean, if you take a tool like Click Dimensions, right? Click D and D365 marketing. I mean, can I be quite honest? I'm pretty sure that Microsoft replicated a lot of what was in Click D. Okay. And if that's what we're talking about, I don't think that by any way, shape, or form, ISV products will ever go away. And in fact, I think Microsoft hedge their bets on ISVs. So that's the first thing. The second thing. Oh, wait, do you want to go for it?
Yeah. So as an architect, I will look at the ISV solutions because, again, a lot of those are pre-built and may save time and money. One of my favorite ISVs is SnapLogic. It's an answer to being able to integrate things easily and friendly in a way that people don't need to be super devs to do it. So there's definitely a market for ISVs. And where we're looking at some of these highly complex problems, I mean, another great one for those who've got Excel gurus that won't let go of their Excels is North 52. That's another fantastic ISV that allows them to still keep all those fantastic formulas, but be able to do it in a Power App. So yeah, I always look at the ISVs to see what they can bring to the table versus cost.
And actually, that's a good point, right? So there's another 2 points here. Is that the second one, exactly what you said. The second one is also extending ISV products, leveraging the Power Platform. I think that if ISVs make themselves, obviously you need to lock down your IP, and we respect that. Anyone who takes that, I'm sorry, you suck, right? So ultimately, it's great if the ISVs, embed their products, but make it open to configuration through apps. But the other thing is think about your addressable market. Dynamics addressable market, targeted solutions, you get that much. With Power Platform, your addressable market is literally 5 to 6 times that. Yeah, so I know Data 8, right? The Data 8 folks, what they had done was they had made their solution available only in Dataverse as well as in Dynamics. So it was like Dynamics agnostic. So you can go and use their solution from a dedupe perspective inside a Power App. I'm like, yes, guys. Sorry, that was shameless marketing. I don't even care.
All right, come back to these restricted entities.
Sorry, I was on a rant. Okay, so restricted entities, right? So if you go into Bing and you Bing Dynamics 365 restricted entities, no, I'm not giving you the URL. Just go into Bing or Google or Ask Jeeves or whatever you use. And if you go and have a look at the list, Microsoft basically say that in the Dynamics 365 customer engagement / first party app data model, you get some really kick-ass data structures. Right now, many moons ago, we used to call the entities. Today, we call them tables. I call them tentities, whatever. But ultimately, they're data structures that allow you to put stuff in, and they contain a bunch of logic as well. So basically, Microsoft is saying, look, there are a number of entities in the data model in Dynamics that are restricted. And what that basically means is you can download the entire, and I'm not saying you should, by the way. Please understand there's a big difference between can and should, right? You can download or install the entire Dynamics 365 customer engagement data model into a naked Dataverse environment, and you can build Power Apps on top of the entities that are not restricted without paying for a Dynamics 365 license. Okay, go into the list. An example of a restricted entity is the case entity. You cannot build a Power App, whether it be model-driven or Canvas, on top of the case entity without buying a Dynamics 365 license. That is multiplexing if you do. So here's the thing. Work order is a restricted entity. Martin Green, you're on the call. Bookable resource booking is not a restricted entity. The thing that lands up on your schedule board, ladies and gentlemen, is a bookable resource booking, not a work order. So now do some math there, right? So now Microsoft say, look, you can install the data model. The reason that they make these entities restricted is because they don't want us necessarily replicating everything you can do in Dynamics. They want us to use the functionality in Dynamics, but not inhibit us when we're building our apps. And I'm air quoting it because I don't think an app is an app. I think solutions are a way better term. So the question I've got, right, is if I, oh, and by the way, opportunity and lead are also not restricted, just throwing it out there as well. So you can build an app, on a Power App, a Canvas app, on top of the lead entity in Dynamics, capture lead information, and then you're done. However, replicating the lead to opportunity process is multiplexing because that lead to opportunity process is, that entity is restricted. Anyway, so like there's a whole bunch of rules around business logic and things, which I'm not going to get into. But ultimately, just so that you know, you can do this. Claire, do you think I should?
Depends on what you need to do, because the problem with downloading all these pieces, as soon as you've got field service or any of the other parts into your Dataverse and you want to export out, every environment you move to needs to have those pieces because it gets all tied up in the back of the solution. So you want to be really careful what you're pulling down unless you've got a good reason for it.
I 100% concur. I agree. So like I used to have many a conversation where folks would say, hey, can we do this? Can we do that? You know what? If you do that, that only squashes your addressable market for your solution, right? Yes, Oliver. So bridging solutions, absolutely. Yeah. So there is a solution where you can have your, and I've demoed this before, you can have your core data structure like facilities management as a block that doesn't interlink, and then whack that into a D365 environment, and you can bridge them using functional bridging or functional integrations. The thing that's key here, though, is that if you do that, then you hit a large number of solutions. So my theory is you've got to start thinking about how to complement what Dynamics have, right, without breaking it, but also being able to run as like a standalone type approach as well. Would you agree?
Yeah, totally. It's making sure that you're making good use of what you've got.
Exactly. The other thing is that with as far as restricted business logic goes as well, I'm probably not going to try and rebuild customer service ever. And like never, ever, ever. I mean, let's use one of the examples, right? So because and that without thinking about restricted entities, let's use one of the examples that I had earlier, right? So even though case is restricted, I can build these pieces that plug in. That's not the thing. The entity is not what makes customer service a special solution. Can I show you something really cool, right? So check this out. The case entity isn't what makes this special. Okay. What makes it special is all of the logic and the business rules that live on top of it. So like you were talking about field service, right? One of my favorites is marketing. This has got things like omni-channel. Claire, would you ever try and build out omni-channel engagements inside a Power App?
Never.
No.
If I couldn't buy Dynamics, I'd look for an ISV.
That's literally so. That's exactly
so complicated to make it work and fit with everything in Office 365.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, look at this. It's bonkers. And you've also got the AI insights that plug directly into customer service. So, and that's certainly really powerful. You've got the bot framework and virtual agent that snap directly into it. You've got channel integration framework. Like building any of this in a Power App is literally a fool's errand, right? You can complement it. You can build an app for, you know, Karen in accounts to check her cases out, but, you know, why would you replace the entirety of Dynamics 365 customer service?
So that's the story of many Power Apps, that people start off with that personal use app. So I've built an app that solves something for my team. You've built an app that solves something for your team. And we start to put these together and then realize that we're actually building a kind of relationship between all these pieces. And then we hit this dangerous ground where the effort involved to be able to make all these pieces work together is more than the cost of buying the out-of-the-box solutions.
I respect that. Bang on. I think so. That is exactly it, right? And when we take a look at the Dynamics first-party apps, they have some serious kick-ass functionality. So, like, I don't know. Let's do a showdown, right? We can pick stuff. So I don't know. I'll go. Do you want to go first, or do you want me to go first?
You go first.
Okay. So I used to follow the marketing journey quite a lot for D365 for marketing, and I've got to admit it was pretty it was pretty functional when it first started out. Now it's usable. And they have this really kick-ass engine for the segmentation. So you can do some really awesome stuff around like munging data together. I felt like that was a really great example of where a Power Platform, Dynamics 365, really outshines anything that you could do in Power Platform.
Yeah, well, for me, whether it's the sales, the marketing, or even down to field services, it's the hierarchical view that, I can be as a director and I'm looking down here. I'm the manager, I can see here. I'm sharing things within my team, I can see across. And those hierarchical views, as well as the ability to share, assign, things we have normally in model-driven apps, but also the integration with Outlook, it makes so much of this so natural for people to use. They don't realize they're using another product.
Absolutely. By the way, I'm hoping you can still hear me. My internet's decided to take a dive.
I can hear you.
Awesome. So yeah, another great one that, and that's a great point. When I was looking at what you could do inside the schedule board, I can't imagine anyone trying to rebuild that. You can do elements of URS, but just not do something like that. It's crazy.
People totally underestimate the amount of lookups and relationships that are out of the box, even in just the sales module.
Absolutely. And that to me is probably the least protected module because, you can probably build out a product hierarchy and things. So I think what we're going to do is we're going to start wrapping up. I've got to share with you this ridiculously hilarious thing that I did.
Go on then.
Yeah, all right. So hopefully PowerPoint decides to respond at some point. There we go. Can you see my quote?
Yes.
Okay, so Henry Ford said this. He said, okay, and folks on the call, this is going to get a little bit deep, right? So he said, if you keep doing what you always did, you will get what you always got. Make sense? Okay.
Yep.
So I'm going to rephrase that. I'm going to change it up a little bit. Okay. So I've got, eventually when it comes through, the market for what you always did is totally different now. If you keep doing what you always did, there is a chance you may get less of what you always got. Okay. And then what I did was I put that on a background with some stones because, we've got to have motivational things. And yeah, so ultimately what I figured out is that as somebody that loves Dynamics 365 and somebody that loves the Power Platform, I've had to have a bit of a mindset change in the way that I understand things and do things. And I'm pretty sure you have as well, right?
Yeah, certainly at an architectural level, you've got to really look at where it's appropriate to use which piece based on cost and time. That's the bottom line.
Absolutely. If I were to summarize this, right, I kind of feel as if when you look at what Microsoft have done over the last 14 years, and you mentioned you've been around since version X, right? They've taken a long time to build it all, right?
They have, and it's really, making sure that, for me, that the adjustment in people's heads is if you're a Dynamics person and you've lived and bred Dynamics, you've got to accept and embrace everything the Power Apps can do outside. There is a world where Power Apps exists all on its own. I would say 3/4 of the jobs I do with customers, there isn't a Dynamics at all when I start. It is huge amounts of complicated stuff done in Power Apps, and it works and it's brilliant. But if you're all Power Apps, what I really want people to do is to sit back and look at what Dynamics brings, because there is so much fantastic stuff there that you can use that out of the box and grow around the side of it and still be super functional, but much faster and much more efficiently.
Absolutely. And that to me just sounds like it's more of an attitude change than a change in the technology because, looking at all the stuff that we get up to, it's just incredible to see, how the Microsoft ecosystem pulls together and all the different digital bricks get layered on top of one another. So I think let's make an agreement, right? Everyone on this call. Would you quite happily say that Dynamics 365 first-party apps or customer engagement, wow, listen to that, engagement is very much alive?
As first-party apps, definitely.
Cool. I agree with you. I think that the first party application layer is not going anywhere. I think that's going to get a ton of investment, and I'm really looking forward to see what Microsoft do next. And I'm even more looking forward to the fact that I can build cool stuff next to it and on top of it.
Yeah, definitely.
Cool. So folks, thank you very, very much for having us. Claire, any last words?
I just really enjoy the platform. There is nothing else out there like it.
Absolutely. So folks, we'll hang around. My camera's gone berserk, but I'm more than happy to take questions and happy to talk about some experiences that we've had as well. So yeah, really thank you very much for joining us on this call.
Thank you, Chris and Claire, for spending your time here.
Cool. Anytime.
If anybody in chat could join me in unmuting your mic if you can, and just give them a round of applause and say thank you, it'd be appreciated. So thank you very much, guys.
Cheers, guys.
That's very kind of you. Thank you.
There is a couple of questions, I think. Well, one question is I can't. Nope, we're good. It's people pressing the hand button. If people have questions, I'm guessing Chris and Claire can stick around for a little while to take them.
Yeah, we can stick around for a couple of minutes. Yeah, I just hope that people understand that this is a working with each other thing, not against each other. So yeah, Power Platform Dynamics unite.
Yeah, I think Microsoft make it a problem in their branding.
Yes, they do.
That's the problem.
They do indeed.
They don't do enough to promote the cool stuff in Dynamics that from the Power Platform side. They do lots of stuff where the Power Platform is put out to customers. I have endless engagements where the Power team have been out there and talked to a customer. And, yeah, you can build all this fantastic stuff. And I look at it and go, yeah, but if you took the core piece of Dynamics and field services, we could solve this in 6 months and still build cool stuff, rather than let's do a 3-year Power Apps engagement, which is pointless.
Yep, absolutely.
I'm just going to dump a link into the chat for the next session if anybody wants to go and jump into that. It's a all-in Ask Us Anything thing, so if anyone wants to jump into that, you can do.
And Matt, thanks for having us, dude. We appreciate you moderating.
No problem. Always makes me sleep better at the end of the day.
You're my favorite moderator, Matt.
I actually think there was 0 swear words. I think that's the first time I've ever seen you do an hour without a single swear word.
Yeah, it's weird for me, man.
It's usually me that gets in trouble, not him.
Yeah, I've been good.
I think you both were good.
I've turned over a new leaf, Matt.
Yeah, being ex-forces, I tend to get overly excited.
Right. God, this is getting hot.
Right, Chris, I've got to jump back to another call. Are you all right to hang in?
Well, yeah, I'll stick around for a little bit, and then I think we've got to join the same call.
I think you're safe. I think you have questions by now. I think you're both safe to go.
Yeah, dude, thank you again, bro. We appreciate it.
No, thank
Thanks,
you.
Matt.
Cheers.
Cool.
See you later.
Cheers, folks.
Bye.
Bye.